Why would someone slice a farmer's irrigation pipe just to make their lawn look prettier, only to drown their own backyard in the process? That's the question I kept asking myself when I heard about Tom Harper and his nosy neighbor, Linda Grayson. Let me take you back to a quiet little corner of the countryside, where a cold war between a farmer and an HOA tyrant turned into a wet, muddy mess that had the whole neighborhood buzzing. It all started on a dewy morning when Tom, a weathered farmer with a knack for keeping his cool, stood at the edge of his field, staring at a black irrigation pipe that had been sliced clean through. Water trickled sadly into the dirt, and the pipe lay twisted like a snake someone tried to strangle. Tom didn't need a detective to figure out who did it. Across the fence, in a pristine HOA yard, a pair of garden shears glinted in the flower bed, tossed there like a taunt. And there she was, Linda Grayson, blonde hair perfectly bobbed, sipping coffee from a mug with a grinning dog on it, her pink robe flapping in the breeze. She raised her mug in a mock toast, lips curled into that sour smile that could curdle milk. Tom had warned her once, just once. "Don't touch the pipe. It keeps my crops alive." She'd scoffed, said it made the neighborhood look trashy. Now, here they were, and the pipe was dead. Tom didn't yell or curse. He just turned toward his barn, boots squelching in the mud, every step slow and deliberate. This wasn't just a cut pipe. It was a declaration of war. Linda had been trouble since she moved into her fancy stucco house at the edge of the HOA's newly claimed territory. Most folks around here had a live and let live vibe, especially with farmers like Tom, whose land had been feeding families for decades. But Linda? She came armed with bylaws, color-coded complaint forms, and an obsession with making everything look like a magazine cover. Her lawn was mowed to military precision, her flower beds so perfect they looked carved by lasers. To her, Tom's rustic farm chickens clucking, tools scattered, and that black pipe snaking along the fence was a blight on her perfect world. It started small. A laminated note taped to Tom's mailbox, whining about unsightly agricultural elements. Tom chuckled and tossed it in a drawer. Then came the knock. Linda, clipboard in hand, announced she was the HOA's new VYC president and had a moral duty to help Tom blend in. Tom asked what law gave her power over his farmland. She said, "Proximity." He said, "Property lines." That shut her up for a day, but the pressure kept building. She complained about the smell of his compost, called the sheriff over his abandoned tractor, even claimed his rooster broke noise laws, though they lived miles from any city limit. Tom took it all in stride until she crossed the line with that pipe. Fixing it was easy enough, just a morning's work. But what Linda didn't know was that pipe fed a flood irrigation system with a little quirk. Tom's land sloped gently downward, and the fence they shared sat right where overflow could spill into her yard if the valve wasn't tightly controlled. By cutting the pipe, Linda had just broken that control. Tom didn't smirk yet, but he knew nature had a way of settling scores. That evening he ran a pressure check. The system cycled on at night, when evaporation was low cost-effective, water SAVYing, and now, thanks to Linda's sabotage, a little misaligned. Under the stars, water gurgled through the patched pipe, quiet as a whisper. Tom sat on his porch, rocking chair creaking, listening to the hum of his system doing its job. Then came a scream high-pitched, furious, echoing down the hill. He didn't need to check. He knew. Still, for politeness' sake, he strolled to the fence. There stood Linda, ankle-deep in mud, robe soaked, slippers ruined, one of her fancy solar lights bobbing sadly by her roses. She jabbed a trembling finger at him. "You did this on purpose." Tom tilted his head, calm as ever. "It's gravy tie, Linda. Water goes where it wants. Unless there's a pipe." She stormed off, muttering about lawsuits. Tom went back to his porch, sipping tea, knowing this was just the start. The next morning, a note was shoved under his truck's wiper, saw cease irrigation until HOA REVYEW. Signed, Linda Grayson. Saw Tom laughed. She didn't get it. Later, landscapers showed up at her place, digging frantically for the source of the water. They stopped at the fence, scratched their heads, and looked confused. Linda, in yoga pants and rage, waved her arms like a deranged conductor, pointing at Tom's land. He waved back, polite as pie, then went to oil his tractor. He didn't need to meddle, his system was legal, grandfathered in before the HOA ever sniffed this far out. Linda, though, was waging war on a man who watered fields for a levying. That night, Tom tweaked the valve just a hair, not enough to be obvious, but enough to remind Linda that water doesn't care about her rules. By dawn, her yard was a swamp. Gravel paths turned to slush, roses drooped, and her ceramic gnomes lay drowned. Linda stood in the chaos, phone aloft, snapping photos like she was filming a disaster movie. Tom watched from his porch, coffee in hand, one eyebrow raised. The land was fighting for him. When Linda banged on his door, mid-rant, demanding he shut off his ancient plumbing, Tom let her tire herself out. Then, cool as a cucumber, he asked, "How do you think your yard got flooded?" She stammered, blaming his fields. He nodded. "Maybe the water wouldn't go your way if someone hadn't cut the main valve." Her eyes flickered with guilt, but she denied it. Raccoons, vandals, maybe a jealous neighbor. Tom didn't argue. "Water flows at night," he said. "Gravy tide doesn't care who's to blame." She stormed off, already dialing her lawyer. The HOA called an emergency meeting. Tom wasn't in VY TED, but he knew the drill. He spent the time trimming hedges and wavying at Sarah, a quiet HOA board member who lived nearby. She smirked as she drove past, like she knew this was a circus. The meeting ended with Linda red-faced, clutching papers, muttering. Sarah later dropped by with a zucchini loaf and news. The HOA had no power over Tom's land. It was never annexed, and Linda's push to claim it failed spectacularly. That night, Tom added a twist. He mixed in a harmless, water-soluble dye farmers used to track leaks, bright blue, impossible to miss. When the system cycled, Linda's yard turned into a cartoon. Blue streaks snaked through her flower beds, pooling around her patio cushions, staining her gnomes. She stood barefoot in the mess, wavying a ruined sandal, screaming about the EPA. Tom, in earshot of her neighbors, explained the dye was non-toxic and wouldn't have reached her yard if she hadn't messed with the runoff. She threatened to sue. He offered a wet vac. She slipped on her patio, nearly toppled her birdbath, and limped inside, dignity in tatters. Word spread fast. Neighbors stopped by, not to scold Tom, but to laugh and ask for dye for their own runoff tests. Sarah came too, sipping lemonade on his porch, saying Linda's demand for an HOA, water sabotage, investigation was dead on arrival. That night, Linda stayed up, flashlight in hand, filming the fence, hoping to catch Tom. All she got were moths and her own reflection. Then Linda upped the ante. She hired a crew to dig a trench around her yard to divert the water. They tore up the fence and clipped a secondary pipe feeding Tom's beans. Tom didn't yell. He filed a county complaint. The crew offered to fix it. Linda refused, calling it community defense. That night, with her trench redirecting water closer to her house, the system cycled again. At 3 a.m., the trench overflowed, flooding her deck, drowning her solar lights, and turning her yard into a moat. Tom, sipping warm milk, watched her lights flicker out. By sunrise, Linda's house looked like it'd survived a hurricane. She screamed at her landscapers, her sprinklers, even the sky. Tom stood by the fence, silent, giving her that calm, unreadable look that drove her nuts. She needed conflict. His silence was torture. County officials showed up, prodded by Linda's complaints. Tom showed them his permits, his grandfathered rights, even the dye logs. They nodded, one saying, "Cleaner system than most." Linda tried to corner them, but they left without indulging her. She sent a thicker letter, demanding Tom stop irrigating near her property, citing emotional distress. Tom pinned it to his barn like a trophy. Then, one night, he caught 2 men digging near his pipe hired by Linda, no permits, paid in cash. He called the sheriff. Deputy Malone arrived, sighed, "You again?" and told the workers they were trespassing. They fled. Linda's porch light went dark. Tom had had enough. He built a new, above-ground valve system, painted it red, labeled it with fake technical jargon, and slapped on a high-pressure flow zone sign. It didn't do much, but it looked scary. Linda froze when she saw it, snapping photos that night, unaware Tom watched from his porch. The next day, she hosted a barbecue to prove her yard was fine. Music played, veggies grilled until the system cycled. Water crept in, soaking shoes, sinking heels, splashing lemonade. Guests fled, muttering about her soggy ground. Linda, soaked and alone, glared at Tom. He raised his tea glass and nodded. Then came the knockout. A land survey, prompted by Tom, revealed Linda's garden, shed, and patio were on his land 6 feet over the line. She screamed about rigged surveys, but the markers didn't lie. Sarah brought HOA records showing Linda's failed attempt to redraw boundaries years ago, stamped denied. Tom sent a calm letter giving her 30 days to remove her structures. Linda paced, called lawyers, interrogated the mailman. Tom installed a camera, sensing one last move. It came at midnight. Linda, with a wrench, tried to sabotage the valve. The camera pinged Tom's phone. Water sprayed her face, knocked her into the mud. She crawled away, soaked and defeated. Tom printed a still from the footage and delivered a trespass notice. Linda froze, realizing she'd lost. She vanished for days, her mail piling up. Realtors showed up. She was selling. A pink sign appeared on the HOA board, saw neighborhood unsafe due to hostile farm. Saw it was Linda's last jab, but no one cared. At the next HOA meeting, she resigned, slinking away. Tom installed a new pipe, labeled Taylor Farms Irrigation, with a cheeky, for educational purposes, sign. Neighbors loved it, joking about tours and podcasts, bringing veggies as thanks. The moving truck came. Linda, smaller now, directed movers with weak gestures. She glanced at Tom once, said nothing, and left. The house stood empty, a for sale sign curling in the wind. New neighbors arrived, a couple with a girl who loved chickens. They brought life back, planting gardens, while viewing at Tom. He sat on his porch, tea in hand, watching the sunset glow over his fields. The system hummed, water flowed, and peace settled in. Linda had pushed, screamed, and schemed, but Tom won with patience, a camera, and water that always finds a way.